is free will, we've described it, a kind of unanswerable question that we can make these good cases,
Yeah,
but is there would there ever be a proof?
I mean, it's hard. Like, it's not a hypothesis that can be tested per se. It's not a scientific hypothesis. It's a way of interpreting. It's a whole framework, a way of interpreting a bunch of evidence, right? And I mean, what's interesting. So, I'm sure you know, Robert Sapolsky wrote a book recently. He's also a neuroscientist, and it comes to the diametrically opposite conclusion to what I come to, and we look at the same kind of evidence. So, the explanation for why we come to different conclusions is probably, I think, that we start with different premises, right? So we have some philosophical positions that we bring to the table, and that explains why we interpret the same evidence in different ways and end up in a different spot. So the question would be really not whether you can prove it or not, but whether there's any good reasons to favor one philosophical line of argument or interpretation over another. And obviously, I would say I would favor the line that I take. Um, and so I think there is, however, one really good challenge that I think is important. So first of all, I think that the physical determinism challenge is not a good one because the universe is not like that. And in fact, it has to be not like that in order for us to exist at all, never mind have free will. Right? So we can just take that. It's just a resource that we can just use in our theorizing. And like you said, the freedom comes for free in that picture. The question then is, where does the control come from? And Robert Sapolsky's main argument in his book is that your behavior is actually completely determined in any given scenario by everything that's gone before, by all of the effects of evolution, by your own genetics, by the way your brain developed, and by all the experiences that have happened to you. And that's an important phrasing in a passive sense, that have happened to you through your lifetime, that have contributed to shape the configuration of your brain right now. Now, as we discussed earlier, I think that the whole point of cognition is that it's impossible to pre-code an optimal behavior to every new scenario that we will encounter. It's just too much complexity, right? So what we have to do is bring all that information into a sort of a central arena where we can think about things, and then exercise judgment, right? So there are possibilities open to us in a physical sense, and what we need to do is constrain those possibilities so that only what we want to happen is what does happen. And that's just too complex a process to be predetermined by those kinds of factors that Robert is talking about. They just don't do that. They just don't fit the job description, right? If we didn't have cognition, we'd need to invent it, basically, in order to do the job of adapting to a really, really dynamic world and allowing us to have the flexibility of behavior that we actually demonstrate. So I think that this idea that we're completely constrained by all these prior influences is just way too strong. However, we are influenced by them, right? And so those influences may, in many cases, be the things that people care about when they're talking about free will. They may say, I wish I had the willpower to not eat all this food all the time. And or I wish I had the willpower to not be to get over this addiction to cocaine, or I wish I had the self-confidence like so and so does to go and talk to pretty girls in a bar, which I don't have, right? So there are things that people are concerned about when they're talking about constraints on their own free will, things about themselves that they might wish were somehow different, that would enable them to act in ways that they'd rather be acting. And so when I'm talking about free will, I don't want to deny those kinds of limitations. They're very real. They're just not absolute. It's not an absolute metaphysical position that we have to come to when we realize that those influences are acting on people.